Every agency has a contract, or two or three. Every traveler signs a contract every single time, typically, that you go on an assignment. Well, what are you signing? Most of you probably look at it and read it. But let's go over today exactly what's in there. What's in there for you guys? What's in there for the agency? What's in there for the hospital, or from the hospital perhaps? Let's go from A to Z as to what's in a contract on this week's edition of Travel Evolved. This is Travel Evolved. I'm Mark Holloway. Welcome to the episode, everybody. I like this one too. I have a couple in a row that are kind of ones that I like. That doesn't usually happen for me. I've usually got to do, tougher ones, or ones that are, that's what I'm looking for. Not usually right up my alley. I'll put it that way, and we'll kind of leave it at that. There are some. There are a few that just, I struggle with. Most of you guys don't know me. If you've watched a lot of stuff, hopefully you're kind of getting to know me now. Listen, every one of these episodes that have ever been recorded, I gave the thumbs up and approve, which means that I said, yes, I want to do that one. Because I do think it builds the catalog. It builds I don't want to say course, because like I've always said, we have a lot of, or almost all the episodes that we wanted have been outlined and have been put into a cadence that we think is a good place to put them. Yep, we've had to pull some back, because mostly why we pull an episode back and don't record it is because we're really wanting a guest that's more knowledgeable than yours truly on the subject matter. It doesn't matter if we're talking about insurance or financial stuff, or a traveler themselves that can speak much more candidly and much more firsthand about what's going on an assignment or in a particular topic. But I approved all of them. If we also throw a newest episode in there, which we do all the time, it has a lot to do with what's happening right now. I mean, obviously, when we wrote this stuff, COVID was going on, but we didn't know how things were going to change. We've got episodes. We're going to be revisiting, like example, the vaccine mandate. I saw that coming up here sometime, I want to say maybe late spring, maybe even this summer. I don't know when it is, but it's coming up. And it'll be interesting to visit that almost 2 years later. Those kinds of episodes we have added. There are guests that come up, and again, if you are listening to me or you're watching me, you guys can be a guest. You just need to shoot. First of all, what I'll tell you guys is join our Facebook group, Travel Evolved. We go in there live twice a week, every Monday and every Thursday. We're going to catch up, and our topics have to do with the episodes that we've already covered on Mondays, and usually on Thursdays we're handling one of our newer episodes and just kind of talking about why we did the episode and giving people a chance to ask some questions or to participate. But if you'd like to be a guest on one of these podcasts, one of these YouTube channels, I'd love to have you. All you need to do is join that group, shoot me or the team an instant message saying, hey, I've got a topic. You don't have to announce it on the group. You can just send me an instant direct message saying, hey, I've got an idea. I really want to be on there. There's something I think that would really help your audience. Or I'm seeing something currently that I think is something that's worth discussing, or something that's been in your craw, or something you want to celebrate, all those different things. I'd love to have you on there, because I do think that this series needs to be traveler based. Yes, I do have a lot of guests that we try to bring in that may have a really good perspective about what you guys do and how you do it, and maybe lending some kind of credibility to some things that you've always thought about. We've done that a lot in the past, especially in the first season. We had quite a few of those folks. Definitely this year we're going to continue to having those as we move into our dead of winter, so to speak, and into spring. But I'd love to have you guys on. But come up with a topic. Again, I don't want to make those topics. I want you guys to have them. So what I'm getting at is those kind of get filtered in as we get the guest, and there really isn't an awful lot of, I guess, effort taken to when that episode comes in. It's just, hey, we've got a great guest and we want to record it. We work through that and make sure that we've got a good time. We do the episode together, and then the team edits it, splices it, and makes sure that it comes out okay. But I love the fact that we've had a couple in a row that I really like. This is a kind of a fundamental one. I guess to pre-frame this episode, I will say a couple of things. One of them is that, of course, I haven't seen every agency's contract. Most of you have seen probably more. Let me think about this. There are many of you that have seen more contracts than I have. I think that's fair to say. There's also many of you that haven't seen as many as I have. A lot of you guys have shared your current contract, and I'm going to call it a contract. I used to teach my recruiters to call it an agreement. It sounds less scary. So if people are calling it an agreement, they probably are doing that for a reason. We can still call it an agreement. Just, again, transparency. I don't like the word contract. It sounds too definitive. Maybe using a contract is good because people back out less if you say contract. I don't know. We'll talk about that here in a bit. But it's, I guess what I'm saying is that I've seen a ton. You guys have shared a ton of contracts with me, which means the episode is going to go over what I've seen over the last 23 years. And more importantly, probably the last 15, I've seen a ton of what agencies are asking for. And I've seen that kind of change a little bit as time has gone by, especially in the last few years. We've seen some new language and things we're going to go over here. But this is coming from a relatively strong position of experience. That being said, like I said, I want to qualify this. Not every agency is going to have in there the language I'm going to discuss today, and not every agency is going to omit things that I'm going to talk about them omitting today. So it's, again, it's just one of those episodes, but I want to have this one so you guys can start to think about what it is that you're literally signing off on potentially every 13 weeks, and usually it is, even if you extend somewhere, usually you have to sign a new agreement. So that's all part of it. And I want to go over what that is today so that it can, hopefully be helpful. But let's do some housekeeping. First and foremost, super appreciative of the incredible response that we're getting on both YouTube and our podcast subscriptions and on the Facebook group. I want to definitely talk a little bit more about that. It's been really helpful. We've got a goal that we want to get to so we can do some things live on YouTube. If you haven't followed us on TikTok, I know that we're on there too. It's just Next Gen MedStaff, I believe. Yeah, there's some advertising, so know that's the case. So it's not Travel Evolved so much on there. But I know the team is carving out every one of our episodes that we've recorded and putting some snippets out there to gain some audience. Again, just we want people to follow us on there. I would eventually really love to be able to go live on TikTok and have some people ask me some questions right there live. I think that's going to be important, and I'm excited about that. That we have to get to a certain number of people that follow us in order to be able for me to do that. But I think that's going to, I think it's going to be pretty good. You're going to be able to literally ask me on the fly questions, and if I can see, and I've watched people do that. I'm going to have to put my glasses on because I'll be looking at a phone probably. And once I can see what the questions are, I've seen people on those. If it gets too popular, they're missing like 80% of it, and they're just picking out some things, which I hope isn't the case. But I do hope that there could be some valuable things both on YouTube Live and on TikTok Live that we can kind of encapsulate. We're doing it live twice a week on our Facebook group, Travel Evolved. Again, I think it's a nice place. I really haven't been posed a lot of live questions, which I kind of wanted to. I wanted some people to throw some stuff out at me. I've always said our Facebook group, Travel Evolved, we're really trying to move that into more of a page for you guys. I've said this on Facebook group. I want to get away from that. It was a group that we created before we even formed, I think, my company. That was really supposed to be separate and really not talk about it. And I really try to adhere to that. I really do. It's just so hard right now when I feel like we're on this amazing idea. But that being said, I wanted the travelers to take over that group. I didn't want it to be we're doing this group. That's what I complain about on Travel Evolve so much, that a lot of these groups are, here's what you have to do, and if you're a traveler, you can only say this, and please be kind and courteous to each other, and please don't do this. And if you're a recruiter or a company, you can only post these memes, and it has to have this. And no, I didn't want that for Travel Evolve. I wanted it to be a travelers group where you guys could literally ask each other some important questions, some tough questions, some not so popular questions, and not be worried about getting kicked off or booted. The only people that get kicked off Travel Evolved are people that are selling something that are, that's not there. We don't want insurance people on there. I don't mind recruiters being on there, but the idea is not to sit there and post, your jobs. You want to be a recruiter, give some information or participate in the conversation and be honest and forthright about your answer. I'd love that. But if you're going to go on there and be just like every other page where you're posting a meme about your job in Hawaii, there's enough places you can do that. So we probably will kick you off for that. But I'd love recruiters to be on there. I'd love my competitors to be on there. Go ahead. I think the more the merrier. The more information you're going to get isn't just going to come from me. If you're in a management level and you want to contribute, and I don't care if you're countering what I'm saying or you're agreeing with what I'm saying, love to have you on there. And as you guys have seen from those of you that watch those lives, there are some competitors on there. I got a couple of people in mind I know. Great people, and I love having them on there. So it's important. So join Travel Evolve. Thank you guys so much for the subscriptions. Thank you guys immensely for continuing to watch this. And I hope to continue to give you guys great content. I guess we'll leave it at that. So what's in a contract? Well, let's just start out by saying that there is very little in the contract that is in your benefit. I think that's obviously the honest and completely obvious, like I said, statement that I'm going to make today. These are contracts that are designed to protect an agency first and foremost. Oftentimes, it is also to sub-protect, if you will, the facility. And I say that because most of the language that's protecting the agency is because the facility is asking the agency for those same things in our contract. So it's almost like mirroring what we have to adhere to from a facility. So it's going to get, as they say, what goes downhill, right? It's going to get put on to the traveler sometimes. So let's just frankly come right out and say that on a contract, there's very little that you're going to get excited about, except for hopefully the pay. Potentially, there could be some things, and we'll talk about here, that you and your recruiter have discussed, or that maybe a recruiterless model like we have has put on there that you would want to see. But for the most part, again, you guys know me, there's not a lot of fun stuff as a traveler to read. So here's what I'll tell you. It's important for you to read it because every agency has a new deal. And I will tell you guys, if you've worked with an agency currently or previously a while, and it's been a while since you've looked at their agreement, read it again. They could be slipping some new things in there that you haven't seen, either on your very last assignment before you extended, or one that you worked with when you were working with them 2 years ago or a year ago. So read it. It is not going to be fun reading. There's going to probably be, the bigger the company, there's going to be more lawyer language, so to speak, legal language in there that is going to be difficult. You may have to read it 2 or 3 times, but you guys can get through it. All of us do. You don't need to hire an attorney to read that typically. It's going to be pretty clear. Yes, there's going to be arbitration clauses and all this kind of fun stuff in there. We all have to have that in there. And by the way, all of our attorneys write these, and sometimes when I've sent off and said let's create our own our current contract, when I get it back I'm like, oh gosh, this is not fun to send out to travelers because it just don't get me started on attorneys. I mean, listen, I've got people in my family that are attorneys. I've got a niece who's an attorney. I good people, but attorneys drive me crazy, especially contract type attorneys, because it's just busy work. So anyway, but I know it's important. I just feel like oftentimes attorneys if you're an attorney or if you know someone, I apologize, but it just feels like your job is to create problems, to get paid more, to fix them and buy time. And, it's hourly. I digress, as they say. So agencies win on these contracts, you lose. I don't know how to put it any other way. Listen, here's the bottom line is that you guys can refuse to sign a contract. You do not have to sign this. In that same breath, I'm going to tell you guys that most of our contracts are incredibly similar with a language that you don't like. So which means that if you're going to refuse to sign one, there's a strong likelihood that you're going to be refusing to sign another. And the other little tidbit I'm going to tell you, if there's a company that has language in there that isn't what everybody else has, it just means that they're not knowledgeable enough to put it in there yet. And when it comes to, let's say, an issue coming up, you're going to find that just because an agency doesn't have it in their contract, if you were to go to arbitration or go to a legal course, they're going to be fighting for the exact same things as the agencies that have those in their contracts. Whether or not they can defend that or not will be difficult. and will be interesting. I shouldn't say difficult. It may not be difficult. It'll be interesting to see how they do. But it's all kind of in there. So they're all the same. So if you refuse to sign one, you're going to be hard pressed to look for a job. That's just the fact that is tough for you guys. You guys have to agree. And like I've always said here in Travel Evolved, you guys win the least on this stuff. Let me qualify. Let me think about that for a minute. You guys win very seldomly. Agencies, I think, have other areas where we win less in certain regard. When it comes to like payroll and guaranteed things like that, sometimes we have to adhere to, employment laws, even though our contract doesn't allow us to bill for those laws. So I think there's some areas where we lose more than other people do, but I really do believe that travelers, when it comes to the end of it, lose more. For us, it's just money, right? Okay, so we have to pay somebody because, I don't know, they got terminated or they quit, they walked off, and there was something they had in there that we can't build a hospital because we're going to walk away from money. You guys walk away from money. You walk away from opportunity costs that you were missing because you took an assignment that you were quitting or leaving or got terminated from. You've got all the heartaches and expenses that you guys have had to secure housing, to drive across country, maybe get your car ready, all the things we've talked about on Travel Evolved, all the credentialing, things that you have done and may or may not have been reimbursed for. So I really do believe it when I say, really and truly, I'd love to see somebody in my position defend that you guys lose more, I should say less than an agency or a facility. And by the way, I don't think facilities lose less than anybody else too. They're on the hook. They've hired somebody, let's just say, and they've got to go through orientation and they've got opportunity costs. So when things don't go well and a contract is brought up for discussion, let's just put it that way, I think all three parties lose. Does the vendor lose? Yeah, opportunity cost and the ability to be able to get that 5 or 7% that they're sucking out of an agency, out of the bill rate. I think they're going to lose that temporarily, but if the need is still there, they're going to get it back. So it could be a slight loss on some weeks where there's no billing, which means they're not getting paid their fee. So I think, I guess I'll say it. I think everyone loses when it comes to this stuff. So what I just said a little while ago, when I was kind of just getting started here today, I said that a lot of the times the contract is a result, what we're saying to you guys is a result of what's being handed to us and that we're having to agree to from a facility, which means a lot of this language is coming from the facility. When they say things like, we can talk about cancellations, once you sign and then don't, do your credentialing or don't show up to the assignment, or you quit halfway through, or even get terminated sometimes. If we have in our contract, and I don't say we because some of us don't have this sort of language in our contracts, that you are going to be fined or there's going to be a penalty for you to quote unquote pay due to those sorts of things, it's because the facility oftentimes is charging the agency. Now notice I said oftentimes. One of the things I do want to talk about is there are some agencies out there that want to just fine you, and I know for a fact that they're not getting fined from the vendor. Now, how do I say this? I've been fined repeatedly in the last year or so from vendors for cancellations and for even delays in start that were due to the traveler. In other words, they signed a contract and you decided not to credential, they fined us, or you've been ready to go and you didn't do your drug screen, or there was something else, you didn't do a TB test and they pushed you back. We've been fined for that, which is a newer wrinkle that didn't happen 12 years ago. But when you start to see agencies adding these clauses in, it's because of those things. Now, I've seen agencies overdo it. I think what they're doing, this is just my guess, is they're overcompensating for the handful of people that they're getting fined for so that they can pull from everybody to pay for some of those fines for the people that don't pay their fines when they get them. We'll talk about that here in a second. So it's interesting how everything is coming from the language that we're having to adhere to from when we sign a contract with a facility saying, here's what we will agree to, mostly with regard to what we're able to bill and what we're not able to bill. And lately, like I've said, there are a ton of vendors and hospital systems that just want to fine the agency for you guys not being potentially committed, like we have some sort of miraculous control. I think us agencies should have some control because we should say we should be not guaranteeing, validating your commitment. And when we see that you're not committed, an agency should be willing to say, I'm cutting ties with this traveler right now. I'm not going to let him or her get us into a position of fining, because sometimes those fines are set on a certain day out, so to speak, from a start date, which means you don't get fined until it gets close enough that the traveler's not going and you haven't said anything. So I do think that agencies need to do a great job. I know we work hard on this to say, is this person engaged in their credentialing process and their commitment? And if we don't see that they are, we've got to boot them out quick so that we don't get fined. That's happening more and more now. So across the board. So if you guys are wondering why your agency is maybe harping a little bit more on your credentialing process or asking you to get us something, get us more than what you've given us. Don't just do the bare minimum. Don't just do the docu-signs. Get those, potentially testings done. Get some of your, let's have you go in and let's see that you got a quantiferin. Let's see that you did a physical if you were missing one. Let's see that you scheduled your drug screen, so that we have a better feeling that you are in fact committed. That's why, because we're getting hit all the time from a vendor who now believe it's okay for us to be the one that pays that fee. And the great thing about it from their standpoint is they don't have to wait for us to write a check. They just pull that money instantly out of their next payment to us by saying, oh, we had XYZ traveler who didn't start this assignment in time, so we're going to pull $500. And this traveler over here didn't sign or didn't start the credentialing process, and we had to go and repost a job, so there's $750 out of there. Boom, 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 boom. So sometimes when you see pay rates going down or staying the same if the bill rate's going up, like I've talked about in numerous episodes, I don't know if I've ever said this, it can potentially go back to your fellow travelers' lack of commitment to the assignment. It does affect the entire industry. If there's a whole bunch of people who are not fully committed to assignment that they're accepting, it is going to hurt the rest of the group. So while I would be out there telling your fellow travelers, stop doing this because you're killing us all, because now the agencies are getting more and more stringent and having more and more fines based upon the things that you all or some of you are potentially doing for us. It's real. I can't just complain about agencies and complain about a hospital without also every once in a while complaining about some travelers, and that's a real thing. The masses and what happens does affect those that aren't even doing that sort of behavior, but it does affect you guys, as we all know. Okay, I'm kind of talking about and around. Let me jump right in. One of the things that's in a contract oftentimes can be a cancellation clause. So what are those reasons? Signing, like I just said, and then backing out. There are some contracts, and you should read it before you sign, that says if in fact you back out, the agency has the ability to fine you or penalize you a fee, potentially. They certainly could mark you as a DNU or DNR, which is do not return or do not use. Let's be frank, it's hard for an agency to fine you if you've never worked for them or if you don't plan on working for them again. I'm just going to throw it out there to you guys. But I've said this on other episodes. Be careful of burning your bridge with a company that you currently or potentially down the road want to work for. And I mentioned two specific examples. An agency that has contracts that are exclusive or has a huge amount of contracts in an area of the country that you are very interested in. I'd be very careful about that. And then I'd also be careful about the top paying companies that are the top 5% paying companies in any given market, which means why would you burn your bridge with a company that's going to end up paying you the most? You're going to keep going down that ladder. Eventually, if you burn your bridge with those companies, you're going to be making less and you have no choice, because a company will say, I'm not working with this traveler, she's not or he's not committed. And those are the two examples I would say be careful of. I understand, I'm telling you that it's hard for an agency to find somebody. If you really love them, they can fine you. You can take it on the chin and say, okay, I'm going to take $500 off of my first assignment next contract. More likely, they're just not going to work with you again. They're going to put you as a person that, hey, this happened. Every agency has a different rule. Some agencies may say, you can work with us again, but we are going to recover that money we were fined, and hopefully they're going to show you and verify with you that they were fined $500, and they're going to say, you can work with us, but you got to pay this. If not, we're not working with you again. I think I would understand that. You should not be signing contracts if you're not going to commit to them. We saw this a lot during the pandemic where people were really trying to better their deal. And I saw people coming to my company that were, I'm like, oh man, I don't know if that's good for that agency, because, or I should say that us, because this traveler clearly has no commitment. They're ready to jump another contract and go with us because we're paying more. And it happened vice versa. And I was like, gosh, it's scary, and it tells you a lot about the traveler when they do those sorts of things. And I'm just gonna tell you, I don't like working with travelers that do that. I don't like working with travelers that quit their contract and come to work for us because we happen to have, a brighter smile, so to speak, at that particular moment. It's scary, and it tells you what the traveler's made of a little bit. So be careful with that. I'll just say that. So there is that. You sign, and then you never even start credentialing. Those are oftentimes in there. So read what the penalty for that would be before you sign. It's okay to say, I haven't signed this yet. If you're poking around with other offers, or you're considering something else, or you're really hoping that your choice A or B assignment comes in, but you've got an offer for your plan C, so to speak, just be honest with that recruiter, that company. Say, listen, I've got other things that I really want first. I may sign this, but if I get something else between now and a few days from now, then I don't want to sign. So just don't sign it. Now, you do run the risk of, especially on those auto offer situations, where if you don't sign in a certain reasonable amount of time, they could offer it to somebody else. I used to be about 48 hours was the normal. I am seeing that being pushed now to 24. If you especially are getting what's called an auto offer, which means you have not interviewed, but they've looked at your information, the manager's too busy, and the vendor has said, we want to have this traveler come without actually you talking to anybody, those seem to be where it is like 24 hours if you don't accept. And I've had a bunch of people recently that had some auto offers and they didn't take it. And sure enough, they offered to somebody else. I look at that as it wasn't the right fit for the traveler anyway. If it was, they would have said, yes, I want to jump on this right away, which a few, obviously a lot do, or not more a few, but a lot do. As they understand the value of, hey, I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth, so to speak. But that's that aspect of it. There's also language in a lot of contracts that talks about what happens if you cancel midstream or in the middle of an assignment. And this is where I think communication is key. I always go back to that episode number 1. I knew I would. You want to find out what happens if. We've had guests on that have talked about, navigating tough assignments. We've had, guests on that have talked about, how to choose an assignment better so you don't get stuck in a tough assignment. And it is important. If you're unsure and you're like, I don't know if I want to take this assignment or not, read the contract. See what happens if you don't make it through. If there's language in there, that you should at least know what that is. What happens if? That should be something that you shouldn't be questioning. You should know as you sign it, I know that if I back out, this is I can expect, or what could happen. And usually it's in there. So there's a couple of things that you're going to see in a contract besides just cancellation clauses. Oftentimes your insurance information is in there. In other words, what the company is going to be offering you, what your copay is. Hopefully that's in there. There also should be some form, whether it's on the actual contract itself or following up if you're taking the insurance, or if you're going to have to sign off and decline it. There should be some sort of an insurance outline, what your copay is, what your office visits are, what your prescriptions are. In other words, an outline of the insurance plan. And again, what your contribution, if any, there is going to be, what it looks like if you're having any of their family or a spouse or the entire everybody on your family on your plan, what that's going to look like. So if you don't see that, you need to get that in writing as well. What does my insurance look like? And even if you're not getting insurance, you at least should have a declination that says I'm declining insurance, and here's the reasons why. I'm already insured, or my spouse has the insurance, that sort of speak. That should be in there. I see a lot of contracts that have nothing on insurance in there whatsoever. There could be more and more agencies now I'm seeing, and I've seen this recently, there could be some language where they're requiring you to get some of your own malpractice type insurance, liability insurance, so to speak, or maybe you have to have an automobile policy if you're going to be doing, whether you're doing like a home health assignment, or they sometimes are now seeing where you want an automobile policy just because they want to make sure that you're covered, your automobile is covered going to and from work, so that there's not some sort of liability issue in case something happens on the assignment that could come back to the agency. Seeing more and more of that, but it definitely, especially if there's home health involved. But I am seeing some agencies are now requiring, believe it or not, that there is some sort of insurance. We talked about this a few episodes ago, so read that, find out what it is before you sign, knowing that you now have to go out and get it. If an agency is providing Housing, which we saw a lot during COVID for sure, less and less now, but there could be some sort of renter's insurance that you have to partake in. Definitely before you're looking at your housing, which has nothing to do with the contracts we're talking about today, make sure you check that out because you may have to get renter's insurance, which is something you may or may not have. And I think it's probably a good idea to have a policy that travels along with you. But there are, again, there's more insurance requirements that come with almost credentialing sometimes that should be part of that contract. So look at that. The big thing, obviously, well, we're going to talk about some other things, but obviously the biggest thing I want to talk about today is going to be, in fact, what is your pay package. That is one of the preeminent things that's on your contract. It's what everyone goes to, and that's why I'm saying they skip all the language and the what happens if and all the things we're going to talk about here after we talk about payroll and your pay package, so to speak. But let's really focus on pay information right now. So typically, and this is so wild, but I'm still seeing more than anything else when it comes to the little tiny section, oftentimes it's really small, on what your pay package information is. It's about 4 lines. Your hourly taxable, the amount you're going to get weekly for meals and incidentals based upon hopefully the GSA that's in that county where you're located in, your weekly tax-free housing stipend, and then potentially your travel reimbursement or whatever else is, maybe it could be some other small things, but it's usually a very small section. That's oftentimes it. And guys, more often than not, when I look at your contracts that you guys are sending me, that's all it talks about. It is completely silent on some of the most important things that you guys have all learned from listening to me and hopefully your other peers here on Travel Evolved, and that is that what happens with hours 36 to 40? It's usually silent. There is usually no language. And what the agencies are doing is they're, I guess, being very generous with themselves, and they're saying, well, we are just going to pay that traveler their taxable hourly rate, which is what most of you guys agree to. Sometimes it actually is written in there. You'll get paid, this amount taxable for everything else. And I've oftentimes told you guys, God, this is one of the biggest problems in our industry. This is thievery 101. Agencies should be paying you, and I'll go slow. Forget about housing. If you're getting, and I'll use these numbers again, boring half of you right now. Let's just say you got a $50 an hour taxable, and they're giving you $360 a week, which is not any figure that I've ever seen that actually translates into that. But that's how much you're getting weekly for meals and incidentals tax-free, which obviously if you divide by 36 hours is $10 an hour. So last time I checked, in this example, your compensation really is $60 an hour, but only 50 of it's taxed and $10 is tax-free. Wonderful, great, perfect if you only work 36 hours a week and no more than that. But if you work another hour, let's just say a 37th hour, agencies should be paying you $60 an hour, not $50, $60 an hour, all taxable, which they don't like because now they're paying taxes on $60 an hour, not just $50. But again, these are bonus hours. These are hours that an agency wasn't anticipating or requiring you to have. So it's extra money for the agency. It should be extra money for you. It's extra hours of labor for the facility. So why is it that an agency decides to keep that $10 an hour and only pay you the $50 taxable and pocket the rest? I understand that on $10 more an hour, you may only see $6 or $7 of that in a net form. Then 3 may go or 4 may go to the government. So what? It's still your money. It is not the agency's money. And like I've always said, we may be billing, $100 an hour for that first hour. We're still billing $100 an hour for that 37th hour. So why we want to increase our margins and cut you out of that $10 an hour and taxes is beyond me. An agency's margin should get smaller. It's not. You guys are agreeing all day long that the agency's margin get bigger, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to just kick that $50 an hour, and you're doing it all day long. It's wrong. It is not the way you're supposed to be paid. It is not a representation of your full compensation. But yes, it cannot all be tax-free or even a portion of it because you've maximized, in this case, $360 a week tax-free, which in my example, I'm pretending is the amount that is allowable maximum that week for that particular county, which means you're not allowed to take any of it tax-free. Great. How about taxed? You're allowed to take it taxed. Government likes to get more tax dollars. especially if that increased and actually made those tax dollars a little bit higher, which means maybe you're only getting, like I said, $6 an hour. So what? It's still $6 more an hour, and you're paying appropriate taxes, which is going to help you at the end of the year because you're going to be paying more taxes in. It makes no sense. And the language is oftentimes silent on a contract. Sometimes they are brassy enough to sit there and throw out there, here's what you're going to get paid. You're only going to get paid, in my example, $50 an hour. You're agreeing to that. And if it's silent, you need to ask the question and say, what happens after the 36 hour, between hours 36 and 40, what am I getting paid for? And if they tell you it's the $50 an hour in my example, you should say, no, I want my weekly tax-free amount divided by the number of hours I work weekly, which is either 36 or 40. And I want that added into my taxable amount. I want you to tax me the whole thing because that's not fair. And it's not. And when we talk about overtime, callback, holiday pay, in my example, you should be getting time and a half of $60 an hour. In other words, $90 an hour. Whereas in the other example, what most of you guys are seeing is time and a half of $50 an hour or $75. So you went from $75 an hour. The agency should be paying you $90 an hour. Last time I checked, that's $15 an hour they're now keeping for your overtime. Or I've seen it where agencies will pay $100 an hour, but they're not paying you that extra $10 an hour for hours 36 to 40. So you're thinking, oh, I'm getting a great deal, but they're ripping you off for those 4 hours so that they can afford to pay you maybe even more than what you should be making for overtime because it's guaranteed they're going to get that revenue first. And for those of you poor saps that don't get to over 40, then they're just going to keep that. Does that all make sense? It's a revenue stream. Agencies are not dumb, guys. They are not dumb. They know what they're doing, and they do it purposefully. And this has become a standard in our industry where it wasn't that way when I got into this industry. It's only been, I can't even give you an example. It's been a while now, but it's the industry norm, and it should not be the way you guys are getting paid. So your holiday, your overtime, and your callback should be based upon your full compensation, taxable and tax-free, multiplied by 1.5. And again, you're going to get taxed on all of it because you've utilized all your taxes. Unless it's holiday, and then let's say you only work 2 or 3 shifts, and one of them's a holiday, whole different story. And that's where agencies really don't like it because we kind of get screwed on those hours. So other things that should be part of your pay package. What is the on-call rate? Some of you guys will have that. Maybe it's not appropriate or it's not applicable, which is fine. Make sure it says it's not applicable, which also means you and the manager have discussed on being on call, and you're not going to have to adhere to it. So more often than not, there should be some figure in there. And there's other things about on-call. For example, did you and the manager discuss, or did somebody verbally promise you that there was a minimum hours of callback that you would be able to get if you were actually called in? In other words, if I get called in, I need 4 hours. I don't care if it's 3 hours or 5 hours. Was that discussed, or could it be you're getting called in for a half an hour or literally an hour and then that's it? It doesn't matter what the answer is, but what you need to know is, what did you agree to? What are you agreeing to on this contract? Is it different than what you and the manager discussed? And if so, it needs to be put in writing before you sign that contract. So those are sorts of things. Along that line, let's just briefly talk about the fact that anything that your recruiter or anybody from your company has promised you, maybe a credentialing person promised you a reimbursement for something, a fit test or getting a TB done, that should be in your contract. You should have that in writing so that when you turn in that receipt or you ask for that reimbursement, it's not up for question. How many times have you guys gotten promised something from a recruiter that turned out that you had to fight, claw, and scratch for because it wasn't in the contract? So think about anything that was being said, and as you're talking to your recruiter or you're looking at potentially accepting an assignment, make sure, and it'd be nice if you told them beforehand so they can say, hey, by the way, you said I get my license reimbursed. You told me that my physical would be taken care of, and we agreed on this amount for travel, which should also be in there. Obviously, we talk about whatever your travel reimbursement is going to be from your agency. All of that language needs to be in there. But please, one of the biggest things I hear is, my recruiter said this. And oftentimes you guys will say, shame on me, it wasn't in my agreement, and now it's come up in the course of my assignment, and I look, and it actually isn't even in there, which means my recruiter gave me some lip service and promised me things that actually probably the company doesn't even know about, or certainly their superiors didn't know that they were making that promise. Sometimes they do, and who knows. But it's got to be in there, and it's got to be in writing. It cannot be some verbal commitment that they said, oh yeah, we'll definitely, It could be something as minimal as you saying, if I extend, am I going to get a buck or two more an hour? If they say yes, then you should have that in the contract. It says, oh, if I decide to extend, this is the promise you guys are making me. I've never seen that because obviously the rates can change so much as they are right now. But anything, I don't care. Let's talk about floating policies. If there is a floating policy that was discussed with you and the manager that you weren't going to have to float, or here's the rules of whatever it was that was arranged, make sure you're putting that in the contract. Tell your recruiter or your agency, this was discussed. Can I get this in the contract? Certainly time off, vacation time. What does that look like? That should be one of the first things that your recruiter is asking you is what would you guys talk about for a start date? And was there any time off that you discussed? And lastly, I'll say this. Please discuss that on the interview. Don't have any agency or recruiter. It's hard. I'll defend us agencies. When someone says, yep, I want the job, I just did an hour-long interview and they loved me, but I forgot to tell them that I need a week off right at the 4th of July because I've got a wedding and it's like the 4th of July. And now the agency has to go back, and that poor recruiter or somebody has to go back, the account manager, and has to resell you on the assignment because you didn't bring it up. It's pretty easy to bring those things up. Like I always say, and I do this during getting the offer and some of these other episodes, don't have it be the first thing you talk about. But if it is something like a vacation or a time off that you absolutely have to have, please bring it up. Make sure you discuss that so that, and I always say, let them fall in love with you first and then bring it up so that they're like, okay, I still want this particular traveler, so I'm gonna agree to this time off. But it needs to be in this agreement, right? So anything that they talk about, personal promises, like I said, reimbursement, all that kind of fun stuff, it all should be there. Contracts are contracts, guys. I mean, like I said at the very beginning of this thing, it is oftentimes the language is not going to make you jump up and down and say yippee. The things you talked about should be in there. That should make you say yippee. Hopefully the pay rate and the way that they pay you for the hours we talked about should make you say yippee. The amount that the GSA is allowing you legally to take tax-free should hopefully make you say yippee, and you've done the research to make sure that the assignment you've chosen isn't going to break you, that hopefully what you take home is going to more than take care of your own personal operating expenses, as you're treating this like a business model, as we've always discussed, and that the assignment makes sense to you. But the language is very seldomly going to make you go, wow. But this is one of those areas that I really, really, really implore you guys to take the time to read every single time. I don't care if it's just a snapshot of the actual assignment. Some agencies, by the way, only make you sign a contract every so often, maybe once a year, maybe once every half year, or every other assignment, or every assignment. Look at it. Make sure that nothing weird has been replaced and there's some new language you didn't hear about before. Read these. Read them quickly and carefully, because you don't want to, I'm saying quickly because we are seeing that revolving door. There's a lot of competition out there right now, and some of the best positions, best being obviously arbitrary, whether it's best location, best assignment, best pay rate, I should say, combination thereof. You never really know, but the more attractive the assignment is to you, potentially the faster you're going to have to move through this. But carve out an hour and look at your contract, make some notes, see what needs to be improved, get it back to your agency if there's things that need to be added, so you can sign it quick and they can accept this position. You can start that process of either recertifying, recredentialing, or getting back, or starting the whole process from brand new with that company. Read them. Every single thing in that contract that we just went over should be written down. Nothing should be verbal. I don't care if it's an email, it needs to be in the actual contract. Please make sure it's in there. And again, open communication is important here. The more you discuss with your recruiter, once they're willing to put it in writing, that should give you a lot better peace of mind that you're with the right company. So if your recruiter's kicking back, or you keep getting versions of this contract that don't show the language, that's kind of warning sign number one. Either they don't have the authority to be telling you what they're saying, or they're not a good recruiter and they're not getting the word out, or the agency has a philosophy or a policy that is going against what it is that you are asking for, which means they may not be the right company for you to take this assignment through. And as I've said many times, there's hundreds of us. There's hundreds of us that hold that contract. Now, once you've interviewed with one company, it's difficult to go back to another, but these are things you should know about beforehand. So make sure as you're talking with whoever it is you're talking to that they say, yes, anything that's discussed we can put in this contract. And so far there's nothing you've said that makes me think we couldn't do it, including paying you properly for hours 36 to 40 and overtime and call back and all that fun stuff. So there's a lot more that can be in a contract. I just want to give you guys not really a tip of the iceberg. That's primarily it. I mean, obviously there's a lot of legal recourse, a lot of definitions that talk about, what is the assignment, what is the typical pay week, what is the traveler role, what is the agency, and they have to define all those in the first half of these contracts oftentimes. But once you get through that, you start getting into the actual nuts and bolts. The first thing you're going to probably see is terminations and fines and cancellations and things of that nature. Read that stuff. When it comes to your pay, go over it carefully. Look, talk it over with another traveler. Does this seem normal? Does this seem right? There's, whatever the case is, if something doesn't look right, find out if it is. Ask somebody else. Have you ever seen this kind of, policy before? Compare that to the value that assignment and that agency has with you, and it'll be really clear to you whether or not this makes sense to sign or not. Hopefully it does. Hopefully this all makes sense. But I'm just going to implore you guys one last time. This is an important episode. I hope it stands the test of time. There's a ton more things that'll go in there. I'm guaranteed over the next few years, as this thing sits out there on YouTube and sits out there on a bunch of podcast platforms, there's going to be a lot of new wrinkles that are going to be added to what I've already discussed today. I didn't want to go into too much minutia because I wanted to cover the 80-20 rule. What does 80% of the contracts hold? And I think I've done that. There are certainly 20% of them that have uniqueness, to say it lightly, that may or may not be copacetic with you, that may not be agreeable to you. You've got to make that decision, and only you. I've always said, in this industry, you got to listen to that inner voice more than any other industry I've ever been in, both on all sides of the equation. I know we do. If something isn't jiving right with a traveler, we oftentimes say, we saw the writing on the wall there and we should have known better. If something isn't making sense to you with a contract or with something specific about the assignment or the agency, you're probably right to double guess and second guess it. So you listen to that inner voice. Guys, I appreciate it. Hope today was helpful. What's in a contract? Look it over, read it again. Ask questions, get it all in writing. I'll catch you next week on Travel Evolved.